South China Morning Post, 12th of February 2024, India supports a resurgent former rival in Sri Lanka to keep China away. China maintains and projects power by funding communist parties across the globe, even though communism has been proven to be ineffective. Individuals continue to be duped. In an indication that New Delhi wants to fortify its relations with a political movement that is poised to seize control of the island nation's government but is more organically aligned with China, India last week had hosted the head of a rising communist alliance in Sri Lanka for an official visit. The Marxist-Leninist Janatha Vimukthi Peramuna, JVP, often known as the People's Liberation Front, is led by Anura Kumara Dissanayake. The JVP has previously staged armed uprisings against the government of Sri Lanka. He led a delegation from National People's Power, NPP, a political party Dissanayake established 9 years ago and which, according to a December opinion survey, was polling 50% ahead of the September or October presidential elections. The delegation was in Delhi from February 5 to 10. Senior members of Narendra Modi's administration that met with the NPP group in India included Foreign Secretary Vinay Mohan, Minister of External Affairs S. Jaishankar, and National Security Advisor Ajit Doval. It represents a significant turnaround in the political trajectory for an alliance that received just 3.84% of the vote in the general elections in 2020. But in those 4 years, a lot has changed. Following its bankruptcy declaration in early 2022, Sri Lanka has been experiencing a severe economic crisis. In July of that year, widespread demonstrations forced the country's previous president to resign. In light of this, observers see Delhi's outreach to the JVP-led NPP as an effort to gain sway over a political party with a history of animosity toward India. Historical rivals. The Dean of the History Department at the University of Colombo, Professor Nirmal Ranjit Duasiri, stated that the JVP had a well-known anti-Indian ideology. Therefore, the NPP is not the best situation for India's interests in Sri Lanka. However, Delhi is unable to stop it. According to Duasiri, the late Rahana Wijewara, the founder of the JVP, gave lectures on Indian expansionism in the 1980s, and India was perceived as an enemy of Sri Lankan interests in those lessons. The party also fiercely opposed the 1987 Indo-Lanka Accord, signed by Rajiv Gandhi of India and J.R.J. Wardene of Sri Lanka, to end the island's protracted civil war. However, the agreement caused significant unrest because it required an Indian military contingent to conduct peacekeeping duties in the nation for 3 years. The agreement impeded parliamentarians from approving the contentious 13th Amendment to Sri Lanka's constitution that year. The amendment has not yet been wholly enacted. The amendment, which India put out in an attempt to resolve racial tensions between the Sinhalese majority and the Tamil minority, is still an essential item on Delhi's agenda. Still, many in Sri Lanka believe it threatens national unity because it gives provincial councils more authority over the police and other matters. Following the accord's signing, the JVP spearheaded an uprising motivated by resistance to Indian dominance over Sri Lanka. Government forces forcibly put an end to it. Given the party's ideological foundations, JVP would feel far more at ease forming an alliance with China than with India, in contrast to its previous hostility, according to Duasiri. An official invitation led to an NPP mission to China in the past. Bhikyasathi Saravanamuttu, executive director of the Center for Policy Alternatives, a think organization headquartered in Colombo, says, so India wants to get to know them better. He added Delhi's fears about regional security had been raised by the recent ascent of a pro-China leader in the Maldives, which probably prompted Disanayake's invitation. Saravanamuttu stated, India wants to ensure their regional security network is secure. Dissanayake stated on X that he and National Security Advisor Doval had discussed regional security and bilateral relations during their meeting. The bilateral relationship and the mutual benefits from its further deepening were the main topics of conversation, according to a separate post by External Affairs Minister Jaishankar on the platform. India will remain a dependable ally and dependable partner of Sri Lanka, Jaishankar declared. When the group arrived back at the airport on Saturday, Dissanayake responded to questions from the media, insisting that the party's political or economic policies had not changed due to high-level meetings with India. We can learn a lot from India in areas like information technology, he stated, adding that the NPP hoped India would help in these areas should it ever establish a government. By guiding the people, we hope to transform the nation. To do so, we need international support. Will require both money and technology. Dissanayake declared, "We must improve international relations because we cannot succeed as an isolated nation." An alternative JVP? Senior political scientist Professor Jayadeva Uyangoda, who the University of Colombo formerly employed, thinks that the JVP has changed its anti-Indian position over time after witnessing how China has kept Sri Lanka in a debt trap. Amidst Sri Lanka's continuous economic crisis, the NPP coalition it heads has been increasingly popular, particularly during the large-scale protests that resulted in the removal of former President Gotabaya Rajapaksa in 2022. There is a noticeable rift between the nation's conventional ruling class and those struggling to make ends meet, according to Uyangoda, as regular people face growing living expenses and austerity measures required by the IMF in exchange for its $3 billion bailout. With the unchangeable ruling elite, there's a tremendous degree of disappointment, disenchantment, and anger, he stated. The country's common citizens desire change. The NPP has worked hard to establish itself as a respectable substitute. Uyangoda says, they want to represent the interests of the majority of Sri Lankans, who are middle class or impoverished and are being unfairly asked to bear the burden of the economic crisis. According to Duasiri, the JVP has evolved into a far more pragmatic political organization trying to match its ideas with the world's ways and has given up some of its Marxist tenets. According to him, many members of the NPP alliance identify as social democrats, advancing democratic principles coupled with social justice. Many people would argue that they favor a system, like that in the Nordic nations, he stated. Saravanamatu, though, is not convinced that the JVP has strayed from its Marxist foundations. One should hope so if they're going to run the nation's government. However, before we can state with certainty that this is the case, we need more assurances and policy explanation from them, he stated.